it's something that I'm really curious to see what happens in 2024, and maybe if it continues that trend up into 2024, if the market can still sustain itself with all the Japanese cards, maybe it may warrant a conversation of rethinking like long-term holding. Maybe you want to adjust your investment strategies. Welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, to NextGen TCG episode 14, a spooktacular episode. We are near the end of November. Too bad this couldn't have been episode 13. That would have been more fitting. But the theme and title of today's episode is Japanese supremacy in the NextGen TCG market overall. So, as always, I'm your host, Tetra Ninja Nick, and then we have Zach in a brand new setting, Gem Mint Pokemon, with literally thousands upon thousands of slabs right behind him. So welcome in, Zach. Tell the people where you are.
How's it going? I'm in Dallas, Fort Worth area in Texas, more specifically the Arlington area. So on a pokey trip, if that's what you want to call it. So got a couple things we're working on here, and told Tetra, hey, we can do this from the hotel room or do it from the warehouse. And he's like, let's do it in the warehouse. Let's show people what we're doing and kind of give people a little more insight into kind of what goes on in the week to week.
All right. So for those of you just jumping into this podcast fresh, Zach is full-time Pokemon. So his job is literally to sell slabs upon slabs, thousands of slabs. So if there's ever a question on whose advice you should probably listen to the most, take from the guy who has literally stacks and stacks of slabs behind him, who is sitting in a warehouse right now about to move a ton of inventory. So just that if Zach needed more clout, the evidence is right behind him. So let's talk about other things, other places that you've been and other events you have attended to since we last talked. Our last recording was a while ago, so a ton of stuff has probably happened. So how you doing? Where you been? What you been up to?
Doing pretty good, man. It's kind of hard to keep track, day to day as things go on, and it feels kind of weird because all the lights are going off. They're on motion sensor, and during the week we actually have like 20 or so people in here running around, and so with all the people running around, it just kind of dims real quick. So maybe I got to get up and do a lap ever so often in the middle of this.
Mm-hmm.
But no, I've been in Arlington for about a week or so. Going to be here another week. And then going to go down to Collecticon in Houston, which would be another event that a lot of people like to go to. We're celebrating a couple birthdays down there. It'll be pretty good. And really just trying to have a good time and hopefully find a couple more deals, a couple more cards and stuff. So I know it's kind of hard to see the background now, but if people are a little curious, essentially I partnered up with someone mid-June. And this is a project we've been working on together. And so the goal really is to kind of, streamers and TikTokers. Oh my gosh, these lights are just so weird. I gotta fly. I don't know. Is it gonna go?
All right. So a little technical issue. Zach is in the warehouse with his motion activated lights. They turned off. I think moving forward, if they turn off, we'll just keep pressing on and continue the podcast. But it'll go with the spooky theme, right? It'll be spooky Zach in a warehouse. Dude, imagine like you turn around like Jason Voorhees was just right behind you.
Dude, no way, man. Or someone in the Pokemon community. I mean, there's some scary people out there. No, but
all right. So you're saying
people are probably curious about what's going on behind us, and so essentially partnered up with someone in the hobby, and our goal is really to sell to streamers, so mostly TikTok, whatnot, some of the big streaming platforms, Strip, etc. A couple others up and coming too that maybe you're a little less known about. And what we're putting together is really just a product that kind of the average collector would want to participate in. So it's not really geared towards the high-end collector or like the people in the hobby every single day. It's really geared to the person that just wants to kind of hop on a stream, buy a card, and they want to get something cool. So got a really cool operation behind us. We're actually filming a lot of content around it. We interviewed a lot of people that were involved in the process, and the business partner I have, he basically said at the beginning of it, I want you to create a product that you're proud about, that you're proud to share with people, you're proud to kind of put your name behind, you're proud to kind of show. And so all of the really, really high-end purchases that we've made throughout the year, we really graded all of it. And all of the grading upside, typically you would capture that on eBay or yourself. We're giving that all back to the customer. So maybe in the next episode we can kind of maybe show one of the products or show something kind of more specific. But we don't sell direct to customer. We only sell business to business. So we only sell this wholesale. Really, the goal is to let the streamer kind of capture most of the profits and stuff. So it's about 200,000 cards behind me. And I know that's quite a bit of cards. It's about 33 different pallets. And we're doing everything we can to kind of keep it top notch. So the product's called Omega. Go ahead.
200,000 slabs.
I know, right?
That's so
slabs,
much.
man.
That's so much plastic.
Yeah.
Oh my god, you guys are like literally nose to the grindstone. But I think it kind of goes to like show you like in terms of like long term viability of what's more viable. You can sell that $100,000-$200,000 card once, or
Mhm.
you can sell 200,000 slabs for like maybe like a $5 to $10 profit each time.
Right.
Just repetitively, and long term that's going to be more viable because obviously at the high end here you're talking about like rarity, high end stuff that just it's difficult to move. It doesn't move that often. Whereas when you talk about the sheer quantity of slabs that you guys are moving, but even if you only make like $5 to $10, you can repeat that basically infinite amount of times so long as Pokemon exists. And just if you're like a small business talking, you know, where this kind of goes to show you like people talk about like how do I sell Pokemon and how do I make this a long-term thing and how do I make this an actual business model. We've talked about this numerous times throughout the podcast is that you're going to be grinding. You're going to be grinding, moving, focusing on moving just a ton of product and just repeating that business practice over and over again.
Yeah, dude, I got a couple good points and tangents to go off of, just kind of off what you're saying, and I want to wrap up kind of the product just real quick, and then I had a really good phone conversation today with someone that kind of hit the nail on the head, and dude, maybe I just got to jump into that first. You know, it's like the hobby back in 2014, 2015. It was really pure, like the collector, like the people who collected, they really wanted the cards. They were all about it. They were collecting for themselves. Went to zero. Who cares? Like I wanted that Gyarados. I wanted that Charizard, whatever it may be. And then as a hobby developed, you had Pogo come out. You had Logan Paul. You had people hop into it. You had a lot of flippers. You had people whose motos in the hobby were less about the collector and more about, oh, wow, I can have a business off this. I can survive off this. I can sell booster boxes distribution. I can work at a card shop. I can do all sorts of different roles in the hobby. And then you get to the point now where you have the live streaming piece of it, and it's changing the hobby even more. You have people that are literally going live and selling a product. They're getting paid right away. They're shipping out same day. It's like the hobby today in the last couple of years is so different than the hobby 8-10 years ago. And the future, I'm literally still in this quote from a friend I talked to today. The future is not always indicative of the past. Just because something happened before doesn't mean it's going to happen in the future. And so the point being is that we're never going to go back to 2014, 2015. We're never going to go back to 2018 or 2020. Like literally the future is going to be different than what we've experienced before. So live streaming, that's part of the hobby now. That's literally a staple, and there's so many people that participate in it. I mean, there's billions and billions of views out there. And so it's like either you can adapt and move with the future, move with how things are going, or you can get left behind. And so, what I'm thinking about is 5 years from now, 10 years from now, what's going to be different in the hobby? Are we going to have VR? Are we going to have, different things? Are there other ways to interact? Or are we going to be able to kind of cross collaborate more with different continents, different countries, more than we are today? And so it's more or less of, I think there's pushback and things on some of the live streaming pieces, but it's like if you can just adapt and accept that it's part of the hobby and participate in it and find your role, I think it's a way to be successful. So that's kind of why I've shifted more from kind of where things were in the past to where we are today, because I truly believe like either you got to get going or get lost. If and you can still do what you did in the past, you just probably won't be as successful as kind of those roles, because usually the profit gets kind of squeezed if once people figure out you got something good going.
Yeah, like there's no better like way to see this. Like we all have smartphones. We all have the eBay app. We all have the Instagram app, and numerous times throughout the day, it's either on eBay Live, or Instagram Live. It tells me Golden's gone live. Other various competitors are going live right now, doing a quick auction, and I think that's a good representation of what you're talking about.
Yeah, who wins is going to be interesting to see. I know eBay Live. I didn't mention them earlier. They've got the biggest platform, and eBay literally will buy anyone that they think is a competitor. So TCG Player had so much organic growth, this and that. Like, eBay bought them because they were just kind of growing so fast on their own. If TCG Player didn't have the track record success and just the organic push of the hobby, like eBay probably wouldn't have. But it is crazy to see because, like Whatnot's been doing the live streaming longer. TikTok has an incredible world presence, and they just get so many viewers. But I think the conversion rate there is a little lower than maybe people who are just hopping on for that shopping experience. But it's crazy to see where things are going to go. But I guess to go back to the product here, really what we're doing is we kind of have a 10 slab box. They're all CGC slabs. Really, they were willing to work with us on price, and other companies were not. So that's long story short. That's the only way to make it work. And if you're trying to get a product that is affordable to a lot of people, you have to have a price point that people can afford. And so PSA, I think it would have been a little too high for the average customer. And every box essentially has at least one CGC Pristine and one Charizard. And then we have a bunch of random big hits in the packs. We have a we have a CGC 10 Charizard first edition base set. A couple other kind of huge hits. We have some Gold Star Dogs we're mixing in. We've got a bunch of different little things that we're throwing in there. And then we have I hired a team of Pokemon guys as well, kind of 5 or 6 guys at the very end of the line. And they're looking at every single box that comes through. If there's a card that shouldn't be in there, like that we think is not worthy of the product, they're pulling it out. And we got a table kind of behind this table over here of all the cards we pulled out of the product. So, I really take it to heart, just that conversation of, it's something I want you to be proud of. And so it's so weird because so many people have so much flack against mystery products and so many people are against it. And it feels so weird to be a part of one now. But I think it's something that when people see, I do think I'd be proud of it. I do think I will be proud of it. And just to give some context, the actual MSRP, so the product has an MSRP value, but the value the cards are put in the product is actually higher than the retail value. If you were to sum up the value of all the cards, again, that's because we throw all the grading upside in the product, and the customer really captures all that. So
cool.
That was a lot. I'm sorry.
Send me a box. Send me a box. We'll see. We'll see
figure
how
it
it goes. We will figure it out. But all right. So that was a very lengthy intro. We kind of got it. That could have been a main topic. No, that's all good.
I don't think I even said the product name. It's Omega Mystery Box. So there's a website and all that. So
look it up. Okay. All right. So let's move into market trends. So lots of things. We recorded last episode. We talked a lot about the Van Gogh Pikachu, and basically the nonsense around that release. And we also gave like estimates of what we thought like the first PSA 10 copy would sell for. I think we both said around like, I think you said 3,500 ish, around the 3,000 mark. I said slightly lower than you, but we actually have some concrete sales now. So from what I could tell, the first sale was from our friend over at the Fine Card. We were both completely off, and I think gives you an idea of how wise and how educated the overall the market is. So the first PSA 10 sale was around $1,400, and then that's after that first sale, it's been slowly decreasing. As of right now, I wouldn't say it's the floor, but we're around $600 for a PSA 10 example of the Van Gogh Felt Pika. So what are your thoughts on that price of the first price as well as the prices kind of settled on right now?
Can we tell people when we recorded that? Can we is that a secret still, or can we just tell people when we actually
we recorded that podcast like around the time like the CGC 10 Illustrator just ended. So that was like over a month ago.
It was like the day of release for Van Gogh. It was like the day after like it came out, and there was like the video of the store, people like raiding like the store just everywhere, and I was like, dude, Tetra, you got to check out this video, and you're like, oh my gosh, like Pokemon's gonna be mad at this, and then like we talked about price all this like as if it had sold out completely day one, and we're like, I mean, it's and now you have this palette that's out there, the Pokemon Center, and we'll talk about, but full context, like there was a little bit of time in between when we release it and when we talk about it.
So what are your thoughts about the $1,400 price and then the $600 price it's selling at?
I'm surprised the $1,400 price. I think the people who win the first copies, like it's always a price you're like, oh my gosh, this guy's crazy. And the thing is, the first copy that sells is not the first copy graded. And so I think there's a lot of misconception there. so it's so weird. I thought it was going to be higher just because people want, like, they see the screen Pika, they see that future value, and you get to the point where like the price just gets squeezed up to even more than it is. So I'm surprised people were a little bit more disciplined there. But at the same time, like, this is what I mean. They still lost like $800 like right away when you think about the current price being 600. I am surprised it is a little bit lower because it is one of those cars that has all the right fundamentals. When you look at, like, it's a crossover, it's historical. You have the previous sales of Screen Pika. We are a different part of the hobby than we are today. And I think the counter argument that I've seen and I've thought about a lot is you have the special delivery Charizard that's out, the special delivery Bidoof, the Pikachu, and those are pretty available and still selling at a really good, a really accessible price point. And so it's like, is it going to follow the special delivery path, or is it going to follow kind of a more historical path? And so the future is not indicative of what happened in the past. And so I think we're going to learn that. But I still think it's a card that the market is going to consume and just they're going to maintain. I think the current price is around 100 130 raw. And it really feels like you're going to get to that point where it's going to be a $200 card, and it's probably going to be pretty quick. And dude, I don't want to say all the comments here, but I remember someone else saying, like, you could order from the Pokemon Center and you got that card like right away from any like TCG products you bought. And people are like, oh, there's so many out there. Like, there's so many people that got them. It's so much more available. And people are buying a $20 product and getting this promo with it. And the price didn't change. Like, it didn't dip to $50. People were waiting on that $50 dip, and it didn't happen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it seems like online, like the standard price is around 100. I was actually on Facebook Marketplace, and there's actually some people around my area selling them for $100, but that's 100 Canadian, so that's only like $5 American. But realistic, that's only like $65 to $70 Canadian. So
Someone's in your area, man.
so that's actually a pretty good deal. I just don't want to go. I don't want to go. I'm gonna buy one copy for myself, and I'm gonna buy all already graded copy, and
Yeah.
that's good enough for me. I don't want to risk that. I don't. First of all, I don't want to wait. I don't want to wait for the process of grading it, and then it come back at 9, and then like they buy another one. It's the old saying, buy nice or buy twice situation. But you like nailed it right on the head. It was like this card is like readily available, like mass availability. But it's still sitting around online around the 100 to 130 mark, like you said. One thing we also need to address is, first off, shortly after or before we launched that podcast, they actually closed giving out that card completely in person in Amsterdam at the museum. So you no longer received a copy of it with your purchase, regardless if you decided to see the exhibit or not. So I said that before, that like any bad publicity that Nintendo will get, they will shut it down immediately. And this is, I guess, they went with the nuclear option of just like completely removing it from availability from the museum. But obviously, you could still get it with purchase from the Pokemon online store.
Yeah, it's super interesting how many more copies were made available, and it's just it gobbled right up. And you think about, like, again, we keep saying modern and vintage are two totally separate markets altogether. How many modern cards are out there that have a pop of like 5,000, 10,000, 100,000? And it's like the market consumes them. And you talk about some of these Charizards that have so many of them, and it's like, where are they at? It's like they're not all on eBay. There might some of those cards will have like 200 listings, and maybe each of those people have 50 copies each. But it's like, where are they all at? So when you see the market just consume this Pikachu, it's kind of like, is there someone buying 500 copies at once? Did someone get 500 copies? I know some for the special delivery Charizard. There were people who had thousands of copies, and I don't know if they did bots or how they did it, but it was something where, like, clearly individuals were able to acquire that in some way. And I'm surprised at how seamless the market grabbed it without really a dip at all. It was like, we love this card, and to me, it doesn't really matter how many are printed. It's a card that should be like 200 plus in the near term, and if it's 500 bucks plus next year, and there's another 100,000 copies printed in December, like, I don't think it changes too much. People love this card.
Okay, there's a question that I don't want you to answer right now, but I kind of just want to tease the question. Does this card project better if it was Japanese promo exclusive, not in English? So in terms of market appeal versus how it would have been distributed, would this card have done better long term if it was a Japanese promo? But I don't want to answer that right now because that is our main topic for a little bit later of Japanese supremacy and being able to absorb it. We just have a couple more things with English Vintage right now. So Heritage auctioned a first edition booster box, and it finished off with buyer's premium 206K. Pretty much as it has always been, it's pretty much in line with the price of a PSA 10 Zard, but still it's a little bit of a dip. I probably about like say like a 5 to 10% dip of what we've seen. I think obviously the high end of that box sealed product in that example is around like 400,000. Once again, in line with the highest end of what Charizard sold for at the time. So, what did you think of that price, and what are your thoughts on it?
I was fortunate enough to be at Heritage for the live auction, which was super cool. I've never been to a Pokemon live auction. I've been to kind of a few other things, and what's weird is there wasn't anything specific I was looking to buy at the auction. I was like, hey, let me go just check it out. It sounds cool. Like, why not like learn more about the process? And I walk in there and they give me a bidder number, bidder 100. And I was like, okay.
That's a good number. You sent me that picture. I was like, that's a sweet bidder number. No, only thing better if it would have been 69. But anyway, so it was literally just you in a room with a bidder number. And I'm assuming it's just like those auctions like you see on like TV. Like you raise your number, and that was pretty much it.
Yeah. So we had Jesus and Jeremy there, two of the auction directors, and then Vin and a couple other the Heritage guys were there helping out. And Jesus and Jeremy, they were kind of pushing me a little bit. They were like, if you bid, you should make the noise or whatever. You should make like a funny noise. And so whenever I bid, I'd go.
You'd be like the yup guy from Storage Wars.
yeah. So seriously, I would go, yep. And then I had the whole room like laughing. So if you're watching the stream, they were like breaking character the whole time. I bid on stuff low. I knew I wasn't going to win, but it was stuff that like dude, that whole room was dying. It was so much fun.
Awesome. All right. Yeah. Continue on with the experience.
Yeah, but to go back to the base box, I think it's really just like a minimum. I mean, like I've seen a few boxes sell around that price point, and it really seems like there's someone or maybe a couple people in the market like maintaining that price because again, it takes two to bid, right? So you got the guy who's winning them for just north of 2. But you also got the underbidder who's consistently kind of bumping it up as well. And I don't know if these are all coming from one source or a couple sources, but there's kind of that steady flow out there. And one of my friends I grew up with, he's doing pretty well in life, and he told me he wants to open one. He's not a crazy Pokemon card collector, but he's someone who like one of the things he wants to do in life is open a first edition base box. And so, hey, the lights come on. And so he was like, hey, if there's one that comes up that's reasonably priced, let me know. And I texted him the link, but he was actually still working hard and missed the auction. But he told me he would have been a bidder on that. And he literally would have opened it for the experience and probably got some value back through grading. But like the goal is to fulfill a childhood dream. And I thought that was like
that's insanity.
So
he must be really well off.
He's doing good. But it's one of those things that like a lot of the people that are kind of either consuming this content or participating are in their 30s, their mid 30s, late 30s, early 30s, or late 20s. We're kind of all in that sort of range, and they're people that are constantly getting later in their career. We don't necessarily know who is going to be the one that just kind of crushes it and kind of takes off. But the law of numbers, large numbers, is that some people are just going to be in positions to do that, whether for a number of reasons. So it is cool, and maybe that my buddy never ends up buying one. Who knows? But it is cool that as time goes on, you are going to have these people who they want to fulfill those things, and the prices do kind of naturally kind of strengthen themselves. But I think it was a low price.
I think 200,000 is like a good floor. I think if you buy in at 200,000, you will in a couple of years you'll do really well on a first edition booster box, because like we always say, the amount of sealed product, the number of sealed product on the market, that number is just, it doesn't grow. There's only one direction the amount of sealed product grows, and that is downwards. Case in point, your friend who lifelong dream wants to open a booster box, and he has the means to do so. So just removing another sealed box from the market. So another back on Charizards. You guys know that we love to talk about Charizards. So we have a first edition PSA 9 Zard finishing off at just shy of 16,000, 15.6, which is it's a good price for the buyer, not so much for the seller. That card floating around usually around 22 to 30,000 around that mark. So we've seen like a significant dip of that price, which kind of ties into our talk about the ability of our market, the English market, especially vintage, to absorb cards around that price point. So I think that's fairly low, and maybe it's not the maybe at this time it's the best time probably to hold on to the higher end English vintage. So what are your thoughts?
It still feels so weird with those lower grades. When you get that 8-9 range, the Zard is further defined itself, over time. But I mean, I remember, years ago, it's like the 10 had its price, and then like the 8, 9, 7s, they all kind of like bundled together, and it was hard to separate themselves. If you look at sports cards, you look at some other hobbies, that have a variety of grades that maybe the 10 is less achievable or there's less out there. Those grades in the middle all throughout have very defined price points, and they're all excluding like the card itself being like strong or kind of the eye appeal factor of it, those grades typically, are more defined. So to see the Zard 10 be as high as it is, and then the 9 be like 15 to like 17K, that's kind of where I see a lot of those price points fall. Maybe like 18K on the high end is what we're seeing, and that's down from 19, 20K sales a couple months ago. It does feel weird because like the 8 is around like, I mean, I think I see 8s in that 10 to 11, 12 range. Like 12's asking, maybe 10s are the deals. And then like a PSA 5 or 6 is like 5K. It's like the floor on like a beat up Zard is like probably 3.5 to 4K is what it feels like. I think a lot of people want that like 5K. So it's like, to me, 5K feels like the bottom. 15K feels like one step below the top. And then like an 8 is like 10. It's like there's so much value there. It doesn't make sense, like all those prices being so close together. And I feel like someone is going to sit down and study this that has enough capital. But I think that there's a play there, and I think there's a lot of money to be made. I think there's collections to be sort of built there. But those numbers are all too close together for the value you get for that super high end piece versus kind of the entry level piece.
Mm-hmm. That reminds me. It kind of reminds me of like the PSA 10 rookie Gretzky. There's like two
Yeah.
of them, but like the drop off afterwards is just so significant that it doesn't really make sense whatsoever. There was like extremely good value in like the PSA 8, 7 examples of that card that if you would have bought in, I think you would have done extremely well on the long term. But I don't want to talk too much about sports because that's a little bit out of my wheelhouse. But it's just something that reminds me of what happened as well with the PSA 9 Zars. So that kind of once again ties into our main topic, which is Japanese supremacy in the overall health of the TCG. Are Japanese cards pretty much flipper proof? Because it doesn't matter. We see the same cards going to auction every single week. The Pancho Pikas, your worlds, your anniversary promos. Like I got a Pancho Pikachu right here that I forgot to send to PWCC. And it just seems like no matter how many cards that go, the vast quantity of cards that hit the market in those Japanese promo cards, they just get absorbed so much better than the English vintage. So that's kind of what I wanted to talk about this week. Thoughts, opinions?
Do you want to kick it off? Do you want to keep going?
No, I just like thinking like we're talking about like laws of supply and demand. It just seems like there's so much supply of your Mario Pikas, your Poncho Pikas, your Team Rocket special boxes, and I just expected to see with the amount of product that's hitting the market all at once. It's just and consistently. I just expected to see a little bit more of a drastic decline, which I haven't seen as of late. And whereas if you take your blue chip cards, your PSA 9 Zards, it seems like the more of those that are hitting the market all of a sudden it's impacting the card and it's impacting its overall value. Like it seems like the demand has been met with those cards in
Mhm.
English vintage, and like you had those people who are sustaining a certain price, obviously, or just buying in on what they perceive as a good price for that card long term. But it just seems like the English market is just the pool is a lot shallower than it is of buyers than it is in Japanese.
I mean, so much supply, you forget about one at the house. I mean, it's
Right?
crazy, isn't it?
Yeah, right?
Yeah, no, I think you hit it nail on the head there with a lot of the different points, and kind of a few more broader points is there's a lot of, especially the time we spent in Japan, there's a lot of Japanese collectors that do not collect English. You go to a card
Mhm,
shop, you can buy any Japanese card you want. They don't want to buy English. They don't want to participate. The people we interacted with that were locals, it was hard to find those collectors that were more like Japanese nationals that didn't have sort of that cross that dual citizenship, I guess you could say. And then for the English side, there are a lot of people that love Japanese. Japanese is the history, it is the origin, it is the rookie. Even to this day, the Japanese sets come out before the English. And so, it's like you eat before the dog eats. And it's one of those interesting things that it kind of still is standing on its own. A lot of the oh my gosh, the one-off like promos, like the screen promos and this and that, they were in Japanese only. They didn't make them in English. And so for years Japanese would get all these like really cool cards, and it was almost reinforced from that piece of it that English just never got. And so to get the Van Gogh, Pika in only English, to me that's kind of surprising. And you brought that point up earlier, and I never really thought about that until you said it. I was like, oh snap, you mean there's a card in English that's not in Japanese, and it's an art that they didn't print, that they didn't like kind of release a couple months later and say, oh, okay, you guys get it like whatever.
mhm.
It's crazy. And another kind of key point there is like the Chinese buyers, a lot of them only want Japanese. And so that they'll come in, they'll buy the high-end Japanese from all the eras. And keep in mind, a couple of years ago, or if I always forget when, but maybe it was last year, a couple of years ago, the Chinese were able to sort of participate in the Pokemon hobby. And one of the hardest parts with that sort of market is actually getting money out of the country, I guess you could say. And so if they can find ways to buy, if you put it on a Chinese marketplace or an auction house, like it usually performs really well. I mean, there's so many items that will sell for more in China than they will any other place in the world. So it is kind of interesting to see how many people, collectors, just go back to the origin, just go back to where it was created and where it was made.
So now that I posed this question to you at the beginning of the podcast. Now you had some time to think about it. Does the Van Gogh promo long term do better as a Japanese promo than it does in English? And I think we've already kind of established that based on the amount of people who only collect Japanese, plus if the cards are coming from Japan, then they're probably going to be less of them printed. Whereas the Van Gogh Felt Pika was basically just mass printed, will probably be continued to be mass printed for a long time. The fact that the Chinese buyers who have recently entered the market aren't really interested in English cards whatsoever. So I think it's safe to say if the Felt Hat Pika was a Japanese promo, just because it would be obviously more difficult to get as well, just in terms of getting cards out of Japan as well as lower numbers. That probably it would do better long term versus English.
I think it's such an interesting question. I haven't had anyone ask that question before, or even seen it talked about online. But every like historical thing that you look at would suggest that it would perform better as a Japanese card. And
Mhm.
you put in that category of special delivery Charizard, and it's like probably not, but it's kind of what it is right now, and it's just crushing it. It's like way better. It's 3 or 4x what that card is. So I mean, you change the text to Japanese, and maybe you also have to change the card stock too. Make it a little easier to grade than it already is. I mean, yeah.
Yeah, I think like the special delivery Pikachu. I think we're talking about the same one with the Charizard and the Pikachu's riding on its back. I think it's like PSA 10 example of that, readily available for like $250. Like you can buy that card right now and go on eBay and get it for $250. And if you talk about like everything that like it's a promo, there's literally a Charizard on it. There's two Pokemon on that card. Um, it's like quote unquote costume Pokemon. To it just doesn't seem like the buyer pool is as deep as it is in Japan. So that begs the question: long term, if you're talking about like long term investments in the hobby, is it better just to try to veer away from the English side and just focus mainly on just collecting Japanese? Are you going to do better long term if you just collect Japanese promos?
I think Japanese promos are more limited. I think the supply is severely different than English. I feel like almost everything in English is printed to oblivion, like at a factorial, like above Japanese. It just feels that way. Um, Again, Pokemon doesn't really release the Japanese versus English numbers. We know how many cards are printed, but like you can't really say with certainty unless you're on the inside. And if some data comes out, I'd love to see it. But it just like anything you collect in English. I mean, there's 100,000 copies of that card. I mean, first issue base Charizard. Are there a million copies? I don't know. Maybe it's hard to say. I mean, maybe there's a person that can guess better than I, but it's something where when it comes to Japanese exclusive things, they're just less available. When it comes to the earlier stuff, again, we're talking about vintage in this conversation, so like the Mario Pika, like some of those cards, like they were very available, for 30, $50 when they came out, and a lot of people didn't collect them because they were like, oh, I'll just get it some other time, or oh, it's kind of cool, but it's just $50 for a card when a lot of cards were $5 or $10. It's like, yeah, it's cool to have, but I'd rather get this other card or this or that. So when it comes to vintage, I think it just reigns true. The Japanese is just it just has a lot of fundamentals that just are hard to beat when you compare them side by side to English. English has way more collectors, way more buyers, way more people that want to want the base set Charizard, that want the Jungle Jolteon. But I'm just going to make up a number here. If you have 10,000 graded base set unlimited Charizards, and like that market cap, you have to have so much money go into it for that to move up a little bit. For Japanese, because there's less, it doesn't take as much to move the ticker.
So let's just talk about, just on that topic of like English vintage and like, so is the question I was thinking about today is like, is the high end English vintage solely reliant on the low PSA 10 population?
I think
we're talking about like Neo Genesis, Neo Revelation, your Typhlosions, your Slowkings, like stuff like that. Your base set Chanseys, Hitmonchans. That's what I consider like that high end, around like that, I'd say $50,000 to $75,000 mark for PSA 10 examples, where you only have 10 to 15 PSA 10 examples in the entire world, which is, it's still, you see, like I myself priced out of a lot of those cards. The Slowkings, the Typhlosions, can't get anymore just because there's just so few copies. There's so many people who want them, and there's just so much more people who have more money than me. So people like myself now settling for PSA 9 examples, and basically like that's where I'm going with here. It's like, is it basically just PSA 10 really just keep like supporting the vintage market at this point?
It's a prolonged argument. It's one of the few arguments that pushes English set cards to prices that are sort of outliers, I guess you could say. T17 being mid 5-figure card, Lugia being a 6-figure card at one point. Whereas a lot of the other set cards, I mean, there's a good bit of them that are kind of around that $1,000, $2,000 mark. The unlimiteds, you'll get down to the $500 mark, $400 mark. I kind of feel like the unlimited and the first editions are printed somewhat equally when it comes to just availability. Just throw it out there. But barring like conspiracy theories of pop control or just kind of whatever you want to kind of throw out there, it does feel like that's a really strong argument, because there's so many copies of those cards that, like, when you hold them and it's a PSA 9 Typhlosion that's going for $1,000 right now, it's like, how is this card not a PSA 10? It looks the edges are perfect. It makes no sense. And so if you look at kind of comparables like CGC, and you look at the amount of pristines that have been graded for some of these cards, and you look at the amount of CGC 10s that are graded, it's actually almost double in some categories. And so I think a lot of people are taking those flawless, PSA 9s is what it kind of feels like. Same with CGC, they get a 10. Now they have the 10 in the pristine, sort of the divider. But it's a really interesting data point to see kind of the pop of the CGC 10s for those low pop PSAs being more than double. And it kind of shocked me when I first heard. I was like, oh, you mean they're not matching? And so it's yes, the cards have consistent flaws. Ampharos has the surface scratches. Typhlosion always has the print line going across. Skarmory always has the back corner neck on it. Yes, cards have flaws, but there are copies of those cards that don't have those flaws, and
Yeah.
I feel like that amount is greater than the PSA 10 pop. So it's peculiar. Let's just say that.
It's when a card around that area and those like tier are awarded a PSA 10, that's news in itself usually. So it's more of an outlier than a regular occurrence. So, but I know we're kind of like this conversation in terms of English is a little bit depressing, obviously, for you vintage English collectors. But obviously, we still have chase cards that come out every single year. But at the same time, I still feel like because they constantly reuse the artwork for the World Pika promos, they went a decade before they changed the graphic until this year, where they finally got a little bit. It wasn't too much of a change, but it was still a change of the artwork in some sense. But there's still a high-end English and very, very rare with the World's promos.
I think like when you compare apples to apples for like some of the cards, like if you look at Japanese set cards, like they actually price way lower than English because you're going to get one card per pack, this and that, and English is one every three for English. But Japanese just has those promos that don't exist in English. And I think that is kind of what we come back to with that Japanese supremacy. So we're talking the SSBs, the Super Secret Battle, Mewtwo, the TMB, Executor trophies, the 97 Pikas, the 98 Pikas. Like those don't exist in English. And English didn't get trophy cards really till 2004 when the first Worlds happened. And so it's kind of like, set cards for English, set cards for Japanese. English kind of, they had that first edition that started with WotC, and Japanese in that first edition didn't start until really VS set, which, wasn't printed in English. But it's Japanese has those promos that sort of elevate it. And so if you want that tier collector that wants the oldest, the vintage, the high end, it's really just not offered in English unless you can be okay with collecting set cards.
It just kind of comes back to my original question: is the Japanese market just because like all the stuff that we talk about? Chinese buyers, is the Japanese card market just like flipper proof, basically? And maybe we talked about like one of our more successful episodes. We talked about how the Japanese market was flattening a little bit, but we're like 6 months later, and it's still maintaining a pretty healthy marketplace, and cards just get absorbed so readily and easily from all these major auction houses as well as eBay. So it's something that I'm really curious to see what happens in 2024, and maybe if it continues that trend up into 2024, if the market can still sustain itself with all the Japanese cards, maybe it may warrant a conversation of rethinking like long-term holding. Maybe you want to adjust your investment strategies a little bit, but we'll update you. I look at auctions all the time, and we'll update you guys in the near future about like how the Japanese just continues just to support itself.
Yeah, I think for the kind of the Comet Warriors, the only counter argument I can think of is like the Lily, which was clearly unsustainable, like the Battle Day Lily that, went for, 100, 102, 110, and some of those deals are private, you got to keep in mind. So it's hard to, go on auction house and see all the different transactions. That card, kind of came back pretty quick. But again, it's still a valuable card. It's not like it came back to 5K. It's not like it came back to what it was like 6 months or, a year ago. And it was an outlier that just, didn't seem sustainable. But in the large part, the Mario Pikas, like you talked about, they went up and they came back down, and privately moving 5,500 plus at auctions, they're 6K plus still, and it's incredible how many people are able to kind of put that into a card, whereas you think like years ago, like buying a card for 5K is like, oh man, like this is a centerpiece of the collection. You really make sure it's the right decision, and it's going to change both of our lives. Got to make sure this is good, and it's just like the hobby just can constantly just pump those numbers into cards left and right, even though that card has 10,000 copies that have probably sold in the last 2 years.
and that is Japanese supremacy. Finishing off our main topic. So let's move into collector's corner. I will go first this week. I will go first for once because I'm very excited about this card because keeping in the theme of Japanese cards, I'm not going to bring anything Japanese modern, but Japanese vintage. And as well, since it's that time of the year of Halloween, it's probably my goal is to release this podcast directly on Halloween, just so you guys have something to watch. I decided to bring a ghost Pokemon. I decided to bring a Gengar, and I decided to bring the best, and correct me if I'm wrong, the most valuable Gengar in the entire hobby. And what is that Gengar, Zach?
Misaki
Gengar. The Misaki Gengar, so difficult to grade, so difficult a promo to obtain. You literally had to mail in a trade, please, as well as a Haunter, and then Nintendo would mail you back the Gengar in packaging that actually damaged the corners of the card, which is why you do not see many examples of this PSA 10 examples of this card, just because they are damaged when shipping back to the owners. And I bought this one from you'll be proud of me, Zach. You'll be proud of me because I bought this from an E4 member, and he gave me a price on it, and I said no, that's too low. I'm gonna give you more. But I gave him more than what he asked. This is something that I've never done with you.
I know, I know you have it. Yeah.
Shout out to our boy Peacock from the E4 community. I gave him like $100 more than what he asked, just because I thought that what he was asking for was too low. But yeah, this is when you look at this card. It's like this Gengar knows he's the best. Because just that smile on his face, you have that old school retro grid background in the back. He's like pointing his finger at you, and it just hit. This is the only PSA 10. This is the only PSA 10 Misaki card that I own. Because
Really?
I stopped collecting. Yeah, because I stopped collecting, and then by the time I came back, everything was just outrageous. But what I generally like to do is when I start a set, I try to buy, like, if it's available, I try to buy the best example or the high end. That way, if I get lag behind, then I can always collect the lower end later because they're more available. It's arguable which one is more valuable. You have the some people like the Alakazam, some people like the Gengar the best. I personally lean towards the Gengar. I know that you have a complete set of this because I tried to buy a couple cards for you and you're off. You're asking too much. I think I tried to buy like the Golem as well as the Amistar from you, but we never settled on a price. But I know you have a complete set of Misaki. What are your thoughts on them?
Omastar was tough to get. I remember that one being a little bit harder to find, and the hard card to acquire in a set sometimes changes over the years. So keep that in mind. But yeah, the Gengar, rightfully so, being the most valuable. My favorite in the set is the Alakazam. I love anytime Alakazam is a cool pose and doing the double shift. But I didn't know you were getting into philanthropy, man. I didn't know you're the big philanthropist these days.
Yeah, I had done so many deals with this person in the past. I wanted to give him a fair price.
So many deals with this person in the past. I know. I don't qualify.
One day, I'll give you more money than what you're asking for.
So trick or treat tonight, guys. I definitely got the trick, and someone else got the treat. So.
All right, what do you got for me?
Oh man, so this is the card. I went to a trade night while I was here in the Dallas, Arlington, Irvine area, and there was a card that I needed for my collection. Pulled up the checklist on the phone, make sure it was one that I needed, and someone at the show had it, and I was kind of surprised. And so, what do you complete after WotC? What do you chase? And one of the things I'm chasing right now is the Japanese E series. And oh my gosh, you can't even see the card. So there you go.
Okay, I gotcha.
So it's Japanese E series, and it is an unlimited Town No Map. I got to make sure I get the set right because Aquapus has 2 sets in Japanese. Town No Map Espeon, and so the guy told me what he paid for it. I gave him profit on it, and it's a card I needed, so he was happy. I was happy, and I always thought the EVs are those cards that, like, this could be a card that's a couple $1,000. It feels like the Umbreon and this and that are always kind of bouncing around those higher price points, and so got this for less than $1,000. Pretty happy about it, and for it being unlimited and it being a card I need, I'm actually prioritizing the unlimited cards because I feel like they're less available, harder to find. I feel like the first edition, like everyone kind of grades them. Everyone kind of protects first edition. You have to teach someone what first edition is. I feel like those are going to be easier to complete in the future. So for now, just slowly build unlimited, and when you find a cool card you need, you buy it.
Eevee's evolutions are always a safe bet, long term in terms of like holding, because there's just there's a rabid collecting community for Eevees out there. So since you are WotC vintage expert, you would just kind of want to just give a brief history of like when first edition ended for WotC and how it continued on in Japanese.
Yeah, so first edition started with English first edition base, and it ran every set up through Neo Destiny. And then Expedition, the set right after Neo Destiny, did not have first edition for English. But in Japanese, they actually didn't have first edition whatsoever until, so Neo Destiny in Japanese did not have first edition, but in Japanese, the set after Neo Destiny was VS. And so the VS set in Japanese was never printed in English, but that was technically the first set in Japanese that got the first edition symbol. So after VS being the first e-reader set, Japan released Expedition, which also was first edition. So it's almost like it swapped at the same time, but Japan had an extra set kind of in the middle that's really the first edition set. So cool fun fact there.
Do you have any conspiracy theories on why they flipped at that exact moment? Like, was the Japanese trying to take back the first edition stamp, and then obviously, like the reason E series after E series, WotC no longer had the contract to print Pokemon cards anymore, so that they brought that in house. But do you have any theories of why Japanese took over the first edition stamp and English didn't continue it?
I'm not, as far as like Japanese starting, it'd be kind of just me spitballing for kind of why. Now, English stopping, that's kind of around the time that WotC lost the contract, like you said. It's not like they lost the contract when Skyward was coming out. It's like these sets have been pre-planned. They'd all done their marketing, all their test prints and stuff, and it's like all that started probably happening like when Expedition was coming out, or maybe before that. I know that there was some frustration for kind of building up for quite a while because it's two cultural things. In America, there's kind of not necessarily a way of doing things, but just there's people can kind of do things the same way. And in Japan, there's just a different way of doing business. And so I think a lot of those just kind of clash a little bit. And I think they're both kind of, both countries are going to do business the way that they've done historically. And I think just the clash of that, I think the English side was a little too proud, probably wanted a little too much, and they just didn't really want to push back on the Japanese side. They didn't really respect kind of, in my opinion, at least like the Japanese sort of tradition there. And if you look at how lucrative Pokemon is, how big it is, how much it's crushing it, how many they printed, and like Skyward had less printed than, like Base Edge, Jungle, all that. Yeah, it was kind of declining a little bit, but it's still like such a great IP, such a great relationship. If I was at Wizards, I probably would have. I don't know. I probably would have done anything I could to keep the contract. And sometimes in this world, you have to swallow your pride. And Japan has all of the kind of leverage in this situation. And so maybe they saw how much money was being made and they want to pull back. And I've read all that stuff before, the different forms and stuff. But kind of what I see from an outsider's point of view is just that English wanted to do it their way. They wanted to make their own set. They had Jamboree. They had a unreleased set coming out. They had their own artworks from some of the artists that was coming out. This could literally be its own episode. But it was a situation where Japan kind of is the yes, no, and you don't want to piss off your boss too much, or sometimes you just got to bite the bullet and just kind of keep doing it. And in Japan, you got to respect, and I think the U.S. just didn't quite respect what they wanted. So that's my interpretation of it.
What
about you?
All right, so that's
new topic.
That's a can of worms that we can get into another day. That's a whole can of worms. But all right, so that's Collector's Corner. Good Collector's Corner this week. So let's move on to viewer questions. So viewer questions from last episode. Our last podcast ran a little bit long. If I would have kept it in, it would have been a 2-hour podcast, and that's too long for my liking. So what we'll do is we're gonna answer the one question that we have this week, and then I'll just tack on the viewer questions from last week that we did answer and we did record. So we're not trying to avoid your questions, guys. We just, for time's sake, making it a realistic podcast to post. It will be added at the end of this podcast after we say our goodbyes. So if you see that we're doing a wardrobe change in the middle of a podcast, keep in mind that was recorded a bit earlier. So let's get back on pushback. So first off, you have to explain what this cancel Mufasa thing is all about. The cancel culture all about Mufasa. The reason why I personally didn't want to talk about Mufasa is because there was just a lot of feels of that scene of, spoiler alert, Mufasa dying that it just I don't like. Is there something that else that I do not understand about the cancel culture around Mufasa?
I think it's just Disney. I mean, people love Disney, and it's just that respect. So I think people are just very protective of their idols.
Yeah, so it was purely for me. Like I said, it was just that I watched that. I cried like a baby when I first saw that film when it came out. So that's why I don't like talking about Mufasa. There's some sort of like pop culture thing that I'm trying to cancel. But anyways, so let's talk about the Ishihara not signing at Worlds.
Yeah, I saw the comment where the person was frustrated that they have to go to Hawaii, they have to go to other worlds, and it's frustrating. But I mean, you got to keep in mind, like, Ishihara, CEO of Pokemon, what he says goes. If he says we're not going to print any more cards and you got to play in the old format that's just what happens. And so I think the frustrating part was he stopped signing, and because he had to get on stage, is what I heard, and then he didn't get on stage for 2 hours. But like, he doesn't owe you anything, like you're lucky that we got the chance to sign, like to get in the line. And I try to be earlier in the line just in case something like this happened. And it's a situation where like he can do whatever he wants. Like, he doesn't have to sign. Like we want to put out a podcast next week, but we don't have to. It's like I don't know. It's like we're lucky he was able to sign. I get that. You hit the 7 or the 6 on the dice, and you got the opportunity to get in line. And I think it's cool. Like, last video, I think it's awesome that they're making it right, and they're saying, hey, you'll be at the front of the line next time. Like, rather than getting nothing, we're going to give you something. So I try to keep that positive view in the world, and it's like, great, people get something this next time, and that's awesome.
What
do you think?
I agree with you. I like the fact that they are even like the fact that they are attempting to make it right. I think it's a positive sign. Whether or not that actually happens this time, we'll have to see. But they could have just said, screw you guys. So he didn't sign. Sorry, he didn't sign. We move on. But the fact that they are even attempting, although you once again have to get yourself to Worlds next year, but they literally could just give you feathers and give you nothing. So they're trying to make it right.
You have a reason to go to. I'm sorry, man. You have a reason to go to Hawaii. They don't sign cards anymore. They're only doing a poster, like a little thing. It's like they're so strict. And Himeno had a signing today, which she was signing cards, and it was like low key, just on Twitter. It's like, oh, I'll sign Pokemon cards. It just so random that came out. So you're seeing all these Himeno cards, pop out. Like, it's actually a couple days ago, but like the fact that they are signing is, like, to me, like, lucky. I feel like they're so close to saying we're not signing at all anymore. So I know it's unfortunate that you didn't get some at Worlds, and you could have, but it's like I'm happy that something happened.
Zach's bringing his 10 Ishihara GXs next year to Hawaii that he has in his safe, right? To get those signed.
Oh, dude, I'm recruiting people to go work at Pokemon Company just so they can give me their free holiday gifts. Like, talk about the play there.
All right, so our one question, new question from this week is from Posu81. What do you think of the theoretical situation where you have a 101 card in the hobby, but it gets a PSA 6? Would that card sell more than a PSA 10? This has been puzzling to me. So this is not. We actually have a recent example of this. So we have the 1 of 1 Lord of the Rings, One Ring. Did not grade a 10. Graded a PSA 9. Obviously, PSA 9 is still a really good grade. It's not a PSA 6. But I think I'm going to lead in this one is that once you hit that PSA 10 mark, you open the door to a larger buyer, high-end buyer pool. You have those cross collectors who just want to own the best of the best. So that does reflect how well that card is going to do in the long term, regardless of it's one or one or not. You just open that buyer pool of people who just want to buy the best of the best, the cross collectors. We talked about it when the CGC 10 Illustrator was going up for auction. We both agreed that most likely the person who is going to win that card, when we thought that that card was going to finish off at $2.5 to $3 million, wasn't actually going to be a Pokemon collector, a person who was actually in the Pokemon card collecting community. It was just going to be some big wig in some other hobby or some other sector of life who just was interested in owning some of the best stuff that you can own in basically the world. So I think it does make a big difference if a card finishes off with. Keep in mind, a PSA 10 is not a perfect card, but it's just the highest card grade available that PSA offers. And that's just my thoughts on it.
I think sometimes when people see these high dollar cards, they think, oh, that might be random, or I can't believe it hit that price, or it's a guess. And sometimes when people are like, hey, what do you think this card's going to? Like, it's a guess because it's literally up to the mind of one or two people. The one who's going to win, and then the person who's going to drive the bid up. And so I think a lot of people forget that the people who are bidding on these items, like a lot of them are pretty smart people. A lot of them have sort of conquered whatever industry they're in or whatever part of life they're in, and everything's relative, everything's relational, everything needs some sort of justification. For a card to be at a certain price, like you're trying to justify it with whatever metrics are available. And over the years, the hardest thing to price is like, hey, what's this Pop One card worth that is never sold, and like I've got it, and what do I do? And it's like, well, we can look at these data points that don't correlate one to one, but they can help you, figure out a price. So a lot of times when you do have that one-on-one card that let's say it is desirable, like that's another big factor. You could have one-on-one card that's not desirable, and like some of the random EX reverse hollows. But it's one of those things where, like, to get to that price point, someone is trying to justify it in some way. When you look at the Illustrator or the Charizard sale or the Pika trophies, this and that, it's like they're pairing these things together to get to that price. And so by talking to some of these people, I can say with confidence and certainty that if that card is a PSA 10, it is going to get an astronomical number as a 101 over the 6. The 6 is going to get the value people think the 101's worth, this and that. But when you get to that 10 price, I get that there's no other copies. The card is what it is. You just get to that sort of that realm where people are looking for reasons to sort of like justify a higher bid. You get in the moment, the live auction's going, you got 5 seconds to figure out what you're going to do. Hey, it's PSA 10. Like, like that cross collector in sports or, Yu-Gi-Oh! Or whatever the other hobby is, like maybe they can justify it. It's an easier sell. Whereas the 6 is, to some people, damaged. It's like if you could own a 101 of all the different 101 things that exist in the world, do you want a damaged 101 or do you want a perfect 101 or PSA 10 101?
It's like we talked about, like when we talked about like Post Malone sale. Post Malone, I think from what I remember, net worth of $40 million. Mm-hmm. You get that PSA 10, you're entering the world of billionaire, like billionaire territory, like buyers who are billionaires who enter that market and that bidding war. So millionaires versus billionaires. Yeah, I don't need to tell you who's going to win that fight and that last bid. Who's going to win that one?
Yeah, a lot of the super high end people, they're the Deca to Cinti, millionaire range. At least the ones that I'm familiar with that buy consistently. Sometimes I feel like billionaires, you hit that Justin Bieber scenario. I don't know if I've ever told the Justin Bieber story. Where
refresh us.
Okay. Well, one time I sold a card and on my PayPal popped up, said Justin Bieber. I was like, no way. Like he bought that card? And it was like a Team Rocket, like PSA 8, like hollow. And I'm like, all cards. Like, why did he buy that card? And so, of course, I hop on PayPal. I was like, just trying to see, like, it wasn't him. And it had some weird name and all this stuff, kind of shielded. But the app, like, notification said Justin Bieber. I was like, maybe not, but I'm not going to tell anyone because, like, if it's not, then then you're lying. And so he makes an Instagram post like a month or two later, and he shows a wall of Pokemon cards, and sure enough, the card I sold him is right there. It is in the picture, same cert number, same everything. I was like, that was Justin Bieber. Oh my gosh, it was him. So some of these ultra wealthy people, sometimes they're not even the ones buying their cards. He probably told his manager, "Hey, go buy me some Pokemon cards. I want to get it." And it just, the way that it was structured, all this and that, it was like you wouldn't have known it was him if they hadn't made this one mistake that kind of, I guess, related back to his name or something. That
Mm-hmm.
whatever happened.
Mm-hmm. Just I remember when this. I'm a watch guy. I remember when the 6263 Paul Newman Daytona was auctioned for $18 million. Like the buyer was not actually there. It was like a third party lady at the scene, and it ended up being some wealthy private buyer from like Saudi Arabia, where that watch ended up to. So yeah, I remember like I was watching that auction. The auction was teetering around like 10 million, and then like all of a sudden like someone went over the top with like $18 million bid, and then that kind of just like shut everything down. It's just like it's a 101. There is no other 6'2", 6'3" Paul Newman Daytona out there, and that person got it just because they're probably a billionaire with that oil money, and then it just
Imagine being in an auction where you're like the third party, the person bidding, and you're told bid to win. I don't care what you bid, win the card or win the item. Like it was like the Jesus painting that came out. I keep saying touchdown Jesus in my head, but I know that's not the painting. It's like the Santa Dolori, or it was some name, but it's like he had the crystal ball on the bottom, he had the hand, and it sold for $450 million, like a crazy record. Well, it was like, I think the ultra wealthy of two different like Arab nations were bidding against each other that consistently sort of compete with some of those high end items, and like they were just, one of them was going to bid to win. They didn't care how much it was going to be, and that thing could have sold for 800 million. If the other country sort of hadn't backed out. But it's these crazy stories where it's like that 101, that 10 is going to hit whatever number it decides to hit. Less about, to me, like less about the fundamentals, but more about like the person wanting it and just
bully bids, the pride of not losing and the pride of owning the 101. Yeah,
because when you get to that top with that unlimited sort of potential, like people justify crazy numbers, whereas when you have anything sort of below, it has that more justification that kind of ties to it. So it's crazy what the 10s can just sort of do, and we've seen it over the years. I mean, no one thought that some of these cards are going to be worth what they're worth, but here we are, and we're still looking up. So.
Mm-hmm. So that brings us to the end of the podcast where we're talking recently. Stay tuned for the edited out Q&A from the last episode that we took out. But yeah, thank you guys for joining us for episode 14 of NextGen TCG. Try to make it a little bit Halloween themed. We're going to try to get on a more regular schedule as well with mobile setups. I thought the setup worked pretty well already. You're in a very dark warehouse, but we made it work. We made it work, and we will continue to make it work. And hopefully you guys will join us every single week or every other week for riveting talks about this wonderful hobby that we like to enjoy.
I'm gonna go find some ghosts in here in the dark, so hopefully I make it. But thank you guys for watching, and see you next week.
If not, then I'll be a solo podcast from now on.
Oh no!
If Zach doesn't make it.
You're like into this. You're like, come on, ghosts! Like Team Ghost, Team Gengar.
I love Halloween. I love Halloween. All right, thank you for watching, everyone, and we'll see you guys next time. Coming in from Mr. Guitar Freak. While both of you mainly deal in vintage, what are your favorite cards from the past few years? You get to choose one promo card as well as one set card. So promo cards. I don't know what the timestamp is, but I really dug the Champions Path shiny VMAX Charizard. That was a beautiful card. I actually have it coming back. I just recently emptied my PWCC vault, so I have that coming back to me directly. So I really love that card. It's a beautiful card, and it's I think it's like $250, $300.
Yeah, it's crazy.
It's a aesthetically beautiful card, and I just love it so much. I can't wait to get it in my hands. If I were to choose one promo card, I'm gonna choose a couple. I love the Scream promo set. Those cards are like just beautiful cards. I also recently have picked up. I graded personally. I imported and graded as well. It was a tournament Zekrom, a Japanese tournament Zekrom that it's absolutely gorgeous. I can't wait to get that back as well. So those probably the Charizards as well as those two Japanese promo cards. I think that are solid choices.
Oh man, I really like this question. I actually spent like a little bit of time going through and trying to pick out like some of my favorites. And I think the cop out answer is like the Sword and Shield like Jolteon promos, 183, 184, which is like the downtown Jolteon. Then you have like the Lightning Jolteon. I think those are just like stellar and like some of the coolest promos that have come out. But if I'm gonna pick like like a card that's like not just a card I'm a fan of, like I really love the Sword and Shield promo Charizard, the 262, which is it came in the Ultra Premium collection with the 3 kind of promo pack, and it's the Zard and the Mewtwo just fighting each other. I think that artwork is like one of the sickest, and I think the price probably got pulled down quite a bit just because it was a gimme card. It wasn't like you still had to pay $80 to $100 for the Ultra Premium collection. And you got the 3 promos in there. It's just one of them. But I think long term, when you look at this card, like it's literally a Zard and a Mewtwo just fighting, and like the artwork is just boom, it's surreal. So I think that would have to be the promo card I would choose. And then when it comes to set cards, like I think anything by Kamiya, Uyama, a couple of the other artists that have sort of popped up, like the Scarlet and Violet Drowsy, the card 210 is just beautiful. The Magic card from Paldea Evolved is just another gorgeous card. Even like the Tauros, like when you see the Tauros is like running, and you're starting to see more Pokemon where it's not like tag team where you have 2 different Pokemon. It's like you have Tauros, then you have like 8 Tauroses in a row, just like in a stampede. Like runs you like Lion King, like Simba, where you at, but dog? Like
no,
we gotta
we will
save
not
him.
talk about that scene.
Okay.
I just on that topic. I was talking to my wife the other day, and she was just like, "I can't wait to watch all the Disney movies with our if we ever have kids, like just like rewatch them with our children, just to kind of like see what their reaction is." I'm like, I don't want to watch The Lion King with our children. That one, like that movie scarred me when I was a little child, and I don't want to put them through that. But don't stop bringing up Mufasa and The Lion King. I can't. My heart can't deal.
Your kid will point at you and say Mufasa.
No.
Oh no, it's so sad.
No.
From Super Junk, I have 3 sealed CP6 booster boxes sitting around, thinking of selling them so I can purchase some of the PSA9 first set base hollows I still need. Am I crazy? Sealed product seems to be doing well long term. Do we take this one? Or do you want to take it?
Let's just establish what he's talking about. So the CP6 boxes are the 20th anniversary boxes in Japanese. Well, I briefly checked on the prices. I think they float around $2,000 per box. So that's kind of give you a gauge of what we're talking about here.
Yeah, the Evolution's equivalent came out in 2016. I used to have them. I think I paid $100 each for them, or I may have paid less. I may have paid like $50. I remember buying a bunch of them and selling them for more down the road. I think it's one of those products that's kind of hit its peak. I think it may go up, but like when you think of the chances of like a first at 9 base PSA, like a card coming in, I just don't see that going that much lower. Like I guess it could go a little lower, but I think they're more likely to go up in proportion at a greater rate than the CP6 boxes. And so like, do the CP6 boxes become 10 grand, which is a 5X, or does a PSA 9 first at base hollow that was 500, does it sell for 2,500 in the future, which is the same jump? And that card, most of those cards have sold at that price point in the future. So you're talking about, will the CP6 box at a price that's never hit versus the PSA 9 cards come into a price they have hit in the past. So I think you're right on the money there. Sell your boxes, get the 6 grand. And just remember when you're buying those first at PSA 9 cards, you want to buy a copy that you're really happy with. Not all PSA 9s are the same. And your price point that you enter the market in is also important. So, if you get a good deal on a card you're looking for, that's going to do just as good as just buying a card you like at full market. If you can get a deal, that's going to serve you better long term.
Yeah, I don't have much to add to that other than just reiterating the fact that I think, at $2,000, you're probably not going to see much more like exponential growth on those CP6 boxes. So
I feel like
see what Zach says. Zach's right.
I feel like this next question's for you, man.
All right. So from Pokeneer, do either of you dabble in video games at all? I find a bigger nostalgia rush from graded Pokemon games over the cards, and where the pops are compared to the cards. And he's very bullish on the long term prospects of graded Pokemon games. Um, so it's just, in all honesty, it just comes down to rarity. Like, what's other than the grade, what's the difference between this copy of Pokemon Yellow versus this copy of Pokemon Yellow? It's basically the same thing. There's no like collecting aspect in terms of rarity, pulling. I think it's just once you have it, you have it. So your buyer pool is a little bit more limited in terms of just like the long term prospects of it. There's no chase. Was the long term story I'm trying to say is there's really no chase to it. There's like no like illustrated there's no like illustrated Pokemon game out there. There's no trophy king for Pokemon game. It's a really shallow lake, basically, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's a lot of video games out there. I think they were slow to release the pop reports for one reason or another. Keep in mind, a lot of early Japanese games don't have a seal on them at all. They came, pretty much out of the box. So it's just hard. Like there's a lot more there that you don't have to deal with the Pokemon. There's some video games there's one game I want to add to my collection at some point in the future. It's just not a high priority. And you know what I mean? It's like when you enter a new collectible, it's like something else to keep up with. So I think you hit on the head there earlier, Tetra.
Okay, JT Wong. Given today's market trends, what are 3 cards at various price points you're picking up today if you had the extra cash? That's a good question. You go first.
Me first? Okay.
Yeah, you go first.
I'll probably stick to what I said earlier when it comes to like the low price card, like the Snorlax DTB promo. For those to be as low as they are, it's like a Greninja Gold Star promo where they weren't released overseas, so I would get a Greninja Gold Stars in English. So I think it's one of those cards that's like, there's mass produced, there's gonna be millions of them, and like picking that up if like the low price point's pretty good. I think Master Balls are a decent pickup if you're looking for like a mid-tier, like modern card, just because they weren't made in English. I think they have a lot of collectability. It's a fun set to build. It has some challenge to it. There are over 1,000 PSA 10, so you have some of those factors. If you're looking at like WotC, any WotC 9 Holo, like when you look at how much modern is just being absorbed by the market at the pace it is, like the WotC pops are just so much lower than a lot of these modern pops, yet the market doesn't absorb them the same. And the price points are like pretty attractive. Like there's probably more older cards at higher prices than modern cards. Like I think that's probably what's lost in the shuffle here. But at the same time, it's like there's just so much value. And if we're going with a high tier price point, I think a lot of first ed Zards tend to auction 3 to 5K, like sort of low tier. You get the PSA 9s around the 16K, the 8s between like the 8 and the 12. And so I think there's a lot of value in those like PSA 7 to 8 range. I mean, maybe even the 9s. I think you got to pick your grade, but I think one of those cards is mispriced. Either the 8 should be lower or higher, the 9 should be lower or higher. Like, I don't know. It's just like, I think all the first ed 9s are, it's between like the grade of a 5 and a 9 are like way too scrunched together when it comes to price. And I think that there's value there. So, need to do more research, but there's some sort of play on first ed Zards, I think.
So what was your middle tier?
Well, middle, I just picked cards around $100 or so. I guess the Master Balls could be a couple hundred, but I mean, Gold Stars get bought up left and right. I don't know if I'd call that like a value play. I just don't know how many Gold Stars you can buy at like a good price point.
You're talking about, but let's just put the investing like part aside. Let's just talk about. I think his question might have been more geared towards the collecting side of it. So stuff that you plan to put in your collection. Obviously, okay, this is a touchy subject because sometimes like we don't want to tell people what we're buying because then
makes it hard to buy.
It makes it hard to buy. But let's just go with just like generic. Like let's just not go to super niche things that are not readily available. Let's just talk about like stuff that it'd be cool to have. But I don't know. As you do it, I'll go through my list. So I think on the high end, I think eventually I will own a Japanese first edition Charizard and a Rayquaza at some point. I'm gonna have to sell some stuff as well, just to kind of like, obviously not being able to get the Umbreon and the Espeon are is kind of a kink in my plans of owning all the gold stars. But I think like the Rayquaza, like man, the Rayquaza are like how like what would you rank that like in terms of the hobby?
It's pretty cool, man.
It's so cool. It's like honestly, it's right up there with like the Neo Rev Gyarados for me. It's just like so iconic. Like the Charizard's not. I don't think the Charizard is as cool. But it's the fact that it's kind of like a Charizard. You kind of like have to own it at some point.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? So that's my high end, just so like my personal collection. Bottom end, I would probably. I don't know, man. The bottom end, I just like. You have to come back to me. Come back to me, and then I'll keep thinking of the bottom end.
Tetra doesn't think about low end cards. Oh man, I think if I were gonna pop in here, I'd probably say Diamond and Pearl Hollows. I think those are pretty cool. I think the PSA 10s on those are just a little overpriced right now. I think they got that low pop premium, so I would probably pick up like PSA 9s of those, like the Regigigas. Some of those, like the Supreme Victors, is pretty cool. I love some level X's, like level X Alakazam. Just cool card.
I have like 5 of those. You want one?
No, I think I graded the first PSA 10 of that.
Oh,
because
man.
When I owned it, I think it was Pop 1, and I think the guy reached out, like an Alakazam collector, said, hey, I want to get that. And I think he paid like $500. I was like, okay, if you want to give me $500, I was like, I'll sell it. But it was one of those, like, I didn't want to sell it, but at the time, $500 was a lot of money, so I sold it.
You made a good call, because Card Rush was auctioning them up for like at $30 a pop. Like,
are you serious?
Like when I was picking them, Card Rush was just like pushing them off the line at like $30 a pop, which is why I have like 5 of them.
Oh man, well, it wasn't in my scope for collecting, so like for me, it was like when the price was greater than what I was willing to hold on, I just let it go. But it's a card I love, and it's a card I want to add to the collection again someday if I don't have one. But it was one of those. It just the price was too good.
I hear you. So what's your bottom end?
Like low end, I mean, probably errors. I mean, you can find so many error cards for $10, $15, and like those are just snap buys. It's like someone sends me something, or I find on eBay or something. It's like $10, and it's like that purchase decision is like 2 seconds, and eBay's checkout process is so quick that like it literally like is so quick. Like, you really doesn't take long at all to add like those like sub $50 cards if the error is cool enough and the conditions there.
Oh, I got one. Eventually I want to pick up the special delivery Pikachu, but it's actually like a Charizard flying. It's like a $200-$300 card. It's like mass printed, but I think it's one that I eventually want to get. I just haven't gotten around to doing it yet.
Special delivery Charizard?
Yeah, or whatever it was, Pikachu, special delivery Pikachu, whatever. You know what I'm talking about. The one that was where he's flying.
Yeah,
it has a little satchel.
Well, there is a special delivery Pikachu, and he's in like a little like policeman, like postman outfit.
That was expensive. I actually want to get that one too eventually, because it's actually says it denotes it as Canada at the top in the title, and I feel like that's just a cool thing I have to get eventually. But I don't want to pay $500 for it.
Oh, Canada!
You know what I mean? I like buying stuff that kind of like reflects Canada as well.
Yeah, I was buying 9s of that for a while, like 100, 125. Like, there were people who just auction them left and right, and I thought the 10s were like a little outside like the value bucket. But I thought the 9s, for how hard they were to get, they were priced, I think, over $1,000, maybe $2,000 at one point. But like for the 9s to like have that $100 prices, like all right, like all day, and I would start minimum bids on like 10 auctions at a time, like every week. And occasionally you get some, occasionally you don't, but it was like, for this price, it's just makes perfect sense. So
another thing I also wanted to get eventually was, remember that Canada exclusive advent calendar that they released a while ago, where they were just kind of like normal set cards, but they had like a snowflake like holographic like stamped into them, and they were like packaged in the absolute worst way possible, where like literally like the cards were like shipped in the packaging. You could not get it was like impossible to get like a PSA 10 in one of those cards. And then I kind of want to eventually just pick one up just as like a binder collection. Once again, it's because it was like a Canadian exclusive thing. But yeah, things to do. But those are some cards that long term I probably want to add to the collection.
Get the snowflake stamp on the Canadian cards.
Mm-hmm.
All right, let's go. Here we go. The last question here. Geek Beak. Let's fast forward to 2030. Which ETBs will be more scarce? Pokemon Center exclusive ETBs that everyone is hoarding, or Gen Pop ETBs that the market is consuming through various means? So I had to do some thinking here. Gen Pop. Are you talking about like earlier like generations, like ETBs that are like low pop, or are you talking about like the mass produced ETBs that like aren't Pokemon Center? So are you saying like Pokemon Center and then non Pokemon Center? Is that like your understanding of the question?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think the Pokemon Center stuff's like super cool because it actually is different. Like you do get more packs for that, and then I don't think people realize this, but the last couple sets, like the promo card and the Pokemon Center ETB, actually has a Pokemon Center stamp on the card on the promo, which like I didn't realize till like recently, and I was like, oh my gosh, like you mean there's another variant of all these cards you got to collect? Like it's kind of cool, right? So you probably hop online and you'll see some. I think PSA is like noting it now, but it's one of those things that's like there's literally a whole nother thing to collect that comes straight from the Pokemon Center. But I think the highest value ETB is going to be the ones from the earliest sets, like Black and White when they first came out. Some of those ETBs just really just don't exist. And I had to sell one for a friend like a couple of years ago, and it auctioned for like $800. And I was like, this ETB for $800? That's crazy. So those are just going to be highly valued just based off rarity and scarcity. But I do think the Pokemon Center ETBs have a much stronger value proposition for like, you know, if two ETBs come out at the same time, Pokemon Center one, absolutely. Like, I think it's going to get to the point that it's like a multiple higher than the common one.
I like how you're like gushing over like special Pokemon Center stamped ETBs coming out of North America, and like once again, Japanese has been like doing that for like a minute now. Just
like unique artwork, all that.
Unique artwork, Pokemon Center stamps. Some of them denotes the actual city, the actual like Yokohama Pokemon Center. It's just it's not scary, but more as in just like frustrating. I'm very frustrated of how behind the North American collecting scene is.
I mean, if they did anything special, you know, like they did the Van Gogh promo and people freaked out. Like imagine if they do anything special anywhere else, people are just gonna, I don't think we can handle it. Like we're not mature enough to handle it. It's just crazy.
Like those people, like we had like the McDonald's promos and like grown ass adults who just like driving to McDonald's and like literally buying all the cards. So like I want one Happy Meal and I want all the Pokemon cards that you have, like literally every single one of them. And just like, come on, man. If you could literally just buy these cards, how like long term, how like what do you think these long term projections are for like the sets from these cards from these sets? It's just not. It's not a good deal, and you're just ruining it for the children, man. Think of the children. You're just ruining it for everyone else.
It's like, ma'am, how old's your child? 35.
Yeah, you make a fair point. Okay, so give us the promos, but make sure there are a lot of circuit breakers in the way, so crazy scalpers do not ruin the experience for everyone and all the kids out there.
Yeah, I mean, just do something. Like, just do something cool. Like, we'll take anything at this point, I think. But yeah, answer your question, Pokemon Center. Yes, they're. I think they're a great buy. For a while, every set that came out, I'd just buy a case, which is 4. I'd literally get a case, go put it in storage. Like that's what I do. And I haven't done that the few recent sets, but they're still available online. Like you can go in there right now. There's like 6 sets you can buy. Like Brilliant Stars, you can get a Pokemon Center ETB right now, which I think is kind of crazy because it's a Pokemon Center exclusive Brilliant Stars ETB.
If you're buying like do you like have you dove in when you buy ETBs? How many do you buy roughly?
ETBs? I usually buy them by the case, like because I value having a sealed case of them. Like I think that's
true. That's positive because try to sell. So like there's a premium of having it in the case as well, especially long term down the road. So just refresh our viewers. How many people like in terms of modern? How many boxes are in case?
4. It should be 4 ETBs per case.
Okay,
so at least from the Pokemon Center. The ones that aren't the Pokemon Center are 10 per case. So just as a heads up, because they're a different size, they're a little bit shorter. They don't have the Pokemon Center text on there. It's like, you know, I think when Champions Path came out, I bought like 15 cases of them or something. Or I don't think it was more than that. It was a lot actually. It might have been like 50 cases or something. I don't know. But it was like there were 20 there were 10 in a case. But for the Pokemon Center, like when I get sealed cases, they're like max quantity 4, where they literally send me a box. It's like ETB quantity 4. So that's, I mean, maybe they're an enter case for bigger. I don't know, but that's just what I go off of.
Yeah, and just as a note as well, if you're buying ETVs and like sealed product, once again, just remember that if you're buying this in like semi large quantities, there's companies out there buying truckfuls of them, and they're in storage somewhere. So it's just
I mean, I can confirm right now, like multiple people that buy new sets buy the pallet, and they do not open any box from that pallet. They may open some from something else, but like part of the investment strategy is like to have a complete pallet like untouched. And there's multiple people, different states, different part of the country. Like it's not just like 5 people all from the same city. It's like it's a consistent strategy where they, some people get pallets of it, but they set aside a pallet of every set.
This is like galaxy brain level. We have like the sealed booster boxes, then you have the sealed cases, then we got sealed pallets, and then we're moving on to sealed trucks. It's just
sealed truck. I mean, that'd be insane. Like temperature control, just leave it on for 10 years.
It's there's just so many varying levels of this hobby, and we're here every single week to talk about it. With